Does tomorrow think differently than you? Reflections of Mosy Kan. Does tomorrow think differently than you? Not differently in the way a stranger thinks. Not differently in the way someone who never lived your life thinks. Differently in the way that the distance thinks. Differently in the way that survived thinks. Today, the place where you are standing right now, today is very close to the wound. And closeness changes everything. When you are standing inside the fire, you do not study the fire. You do not ask what the fire is trying to teach you. You do not think about what the fire will leave behind. You burn. That's what today does. Today burns. Today reacts before it understands. Today speaks before it has all the words. Today draws conclusions from incomplete evidence. Because today does not have the luxury of waiting. Today is urgent. Today is afraid. Today is standing in a moment it did not fully choose, and trying to make sense of it with a mind that is still shaken. Today sees the door that closed and calls it an ending. Today sees the person who left and calls it abandonment. Today sees the plan that fell apart and calls it failure. Today sees the silence where there used to be noise and calls it loss. And today is not wrong to call it those things. Today is not foolish. Today is not weak. Today is simply working with what it has, which is the raw, unprocessed weight of living through something before it has fully finished happening. But tomorrow thinks differently, not because tomorrow is wise in some grand, mystical sense, not because tomorrow has been given answers that today was denied. Tomorrow thinks differently because tomorrow has distance, and distance is not the same as forgetting. Distance is not the same as healing. Distance does not remove the event. Distance simply gives the mind enough room to stop reacting and begin to see. Tomorrow looks back at the door that closed, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, tomorrow sees that what was behind that door was not what you needed. That the closing was not punishment, that the closing was, in some quiet and unglamorous way, a form of protection you were not ready to receive. Tomorrow looks at the plan that fell apart and sees what you built in the rubble. Not immediately, not painlessly, but eventually. Tomorrow looks at the silence where there used to be noise and sometimes understands that some noise was never peace. It was just familiar. We misread our lives most deeply when we are still living through the hardest part of them. This is not a flaw. This is not a failure of character. This is what it means to be a human being inside of time, moving forward without being able to see forward. You are not supposed to understand the story while you are still inside the sentence. Today sees the event. Tomorrow sees what the event created inside you. Those are not the same thing. The event is the thing that happened. What the event created is a version of you. Who knows how to recognize that kind of pain early? Who now knows what they can survive? Who now holds boundaries they never held before? Who now chooses differently? Not because they were told to, but because they lived their way into knowing. Today cannot see that person yet. That person has not fully arrived. But tomorrow already knows them. And this is where it becomes difficult. Because today will not wait quietly. Today will not say, I'll let tomorrow explain this. Today will build a case. Today will rehearse the evidence. Today will tell you what you are, what you deserve, what this means about your life, your worth, your future. And today will say all of this with complete conviction, with a voice that sounds so certain. It is almost impossible not to believe it. Today is persuasive because today is close, and closeness sounds like truth. But closeness is not the truth. Closeness is intensity, and intensity is not the same thing as accuracy. The thoughts you have at 3 in the morning are not more honest than the thoughts you have at noon. They are simply louder. The conclusions you reach in the middle of the wound are not more true than the conclusions you reach after the wound has begun to change its shape. They are simply more urgent. Maybe the question is not whether tomorrow thinks differently. Maybe the real question is whether you are willing to stop believing every thought that today gives you, not dismissing them, not suppressing them, not performing a kind of false peace that pretends the pain is not real, but holding those thoughts with slightly looser grip, asking quietly, is this the whole story? Or is this just a part of the story I can see from here? There's a version of you that has already walked through this. Not in the mystical sense, not in the predetermined sense, but in the sense that the human mind, given enough time and enough distance, tends to reorganize what it has lived through into something it can carry. Not something light, not something painless, but something integrated, something that belongs to you, rather than something that rules you. That version of you does not think the same way you think right now. That version of you has context. Tomorrow does not erase the pain. Let me be clear about that. Tomorrow does not arrive one morning and announce that everything you suffered was secretly fine. Tomorrow does not redeem every loss. Tomorrow does not explain every silence. Tomorrow does not justify everything that broke you. Some things broke you, and that is simply what they did. But tomorrow may slowly, incompletely, without ceremony, give the pain a different meaning. Not the meaning you would have chosen. Not the meaning that makes sense, that makes the story feel clean, but meaning nonetheless. The kind of meaning that comes not from explanation, but from survival, from continuity, from discovering that you are still here, still thinking, still asking questions about who you are and what this life requires of you. That is nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot. That's not nothing. Does tomorrow think differently than you? Yes, but not because tomorrow is a different person. Tomorrow is not the stranger. Tomorrow is not someone who escaped what you are living through. Tomorrow is a part of you that survives today long enough to understand it. Tomorrow is the same mind, but without the emergency, without the immediacy, without the raw open wound that makes everything feel final when almost nothing is. Tomorrow thinks differently because tomorrow is no longer trapped inside the moment. And the moment, no matter how consuming it feels right now, is not the whole of you. It is a chapter, a hard one perhaps, a long one possibly, but a chapter. And somewhere further into this book, there is a version of you reading back over this page, not without grief, not without remembering how much it cost, but reading it from the other side of it, with enough distance to finally see what today could not. The question is not whether tomorrow will understand you. The question is whether you can extend today just a little bit of the mercy that tomorrow will eventually give you anyway. Reflections of Mosy Kan.